Can you speak a little bit about the meaning of Rigpa?
About which?
Rigpa.
Well, Rigpa is a technical term in Tibetan Buddhism, which is generally translated as awareness, which is sort of a poor translation. Rigpa means the fact of presence, which is the fact of experience, which is, of course, the fundamental fact. In other words, it is awareness, but it's not an awareness that you can ratchet up or tone down, that you can have fuzzed out or have focused. It's the fundamental, unstoppable awareness of the existence of the present moment, right? You can have 105 fever and be high on acid and have drunk a bottle of scotch, so you're just pretty scattered, okay? And yet, that fact, that scatteredness will be just absolutely present, won't it? Just like sitting in this room is just absolutely present. That presence is what Rigpa refers to. So it is an awareness, but it's actually more than that. It includes, you can say, if you want to get technical, and I really hate to use this word, it's non-dual, because it's not an awareness of something. It is awareness that is anything, that is whatever it happens to appear to be. A dream illustrates this principle rather nicely, because a dream has presence, and yet you wake up, you know there was nothing there. There was nothing there. And yet the presence of the dream is undeniable. The awareness of the dream, in this case Rigpa, is the only thing that was there. And the objects, the seeming objects in the dream, were just that fact of this awareness. But, I don't necessarily recommend, I know there's all of these spiritual traditions and so on, and of course all of us have had exposure to various aspects of them in greater or lesser depth. And I don't recommend approaching your experience or approaching any kind of an investigation in terms of these traditions necessarily, because it's going to be unnecessarily cumbersome. You don't need a philosophy, you don't need technical terms. Your experience is happening in real time. You can just look at it very directly and notice that you don't know exactly what it is. You actually don't know exactly what is happening here, even as it is self-evidently happening. You're very familiar with it, of course. We're all very familiar with our experience, and we're used to thinking we know a lot about it. But if we look very closely, we'll notice that it's all bravado and parroting of things we've been told. In actuality, there's no way to know what this is. There's no way to describe what this is. And again, I don't want to, I'm not, drifting off into abstraction here. I'm talking about this actual fact, your experience is present, no? Your experience is actually happening. It's undeniable a fact. It's not, the fact that experience is happening is not an idea. I mean, putting it in those words, of course, makes it an idea, but the fact itself is undeniable. Just be with that fact and look how astounding it is. The fact that it's instantaneous, the fact that it instantaneously disappears, all conditions vanish after they've been around zero time. It's not like the present moment lasts a second and it sort of appears and then it sort of sits inertly for a second and then disappears. It's like, no. Circumstances appear and that appearance is their disappearance. They're gone. The present moment has zero duration. So the world is basically never here. It's here for zero time. And yet this experience is always smack on that zero time. Right? It's always just exactly here now. And so it seems to be permanent. It seems to not be going anywhere at all. It seems to be relatively stable and inert. But it's a little more interesting than that if we look.
You said a few minutes ago about like if we were in an ordinary room, whatever's happening, that can never be repeated, like the light and all that. Mm-hmm. What if we're in a completely dark room? I mean, wouldn't that could be repeated quite easily, could it not?
Well, the description could be repeated, but exactly what your experience is in any given instant in this dark room will be unique. You won't be thinking the same thoughts, you won't be having the same hallucinations, you won't be feeling the same sensations. Exactly.
Right. But you wouldn't be seeing anything except maybe on the screen of your mind or something like that.
Well, calling it the screen of your mind, what does that mean?
But I mean,
anything you see, you're seeing it, the way that you're seeing it.
But if you're seeing it, if you're looking at a completely dark room with no light in it,
right,
you wouldn't really see that exact. I mean, that would not change, would it?
Well, there's no that there. There's all that is there is your experience. Try it. In fact, this is a spiritual technique that's used in a bunch of traditions. You go into an absolutely dark space. Mm-hmm. And people, Tibetans do this, they'll do it for like months at a time. They basically seal themselves in a place with zero light, zero external light. And do you think that they just sit around seeing nothing the whole time?
I don't know.
Do you think it's boring? You ever heard of a sensory deprivation tank?
Yeah, I've been in those. Yeah.
Okay. What was that like?
That was fun.
Was it boring?
No.
Okay. Was there light?
Yeah, I guess there was a bit of light. There was some sort of... It wasn't completely dark and black.
Sounds like a pretty wimpy sensory deprivation tank.
Well, maybe you could have one that would be completely dark and black. But then it would seem that's how that would look then, would it not? When I'm not...
Would it?
I don't know. I mean,
the description might be the same. The description might be, oh yeah, this is darkness, but the experience is always something. You know, the fantasy is, oh, darkness is nothing. Darkness is seeing nothing, but you never see nothing. You see darkness, and in fact, darkness has endless nuance. You know, you close your eyes, and I'm basically seeing nothing. I mean, you close your eyes and you put, a pillow over your head, and you put gauze over it, and you pile it down, so there's basically zero light entering your eyes, and just look at your field of vision for 5 minutes, and you tell me what you see. And if you say nothing, you're a liar, or you're not very sensitive. Yeah. Light always appears. Light unstoppably appears in the field of vision, but irrespective of supposed external circumstances.
Good. Thank you.
So when you say that we don't know what this is, it seems to me that that's in a very specific but very habitual context, that being investigating our experience with thoughts, attempting to articulate those thoughts in words, and then only validating those words if they make sense. Right. So can you talk a little bit about that context and what the alternatives to it might be?
Yeah, good point. Of course, you as you rightly point out, I'm pulling a trick when I say we can't know what this is. We cannot know what this is in the normal human mode, humanly accepted mode of knowing as being able to describe, being able to comprehend, being able to conceive of, being able to model, being able to communicate. But of course, we can't do it because we can never do it with anything. So that's not actually a true mode of knowing. That's actually just a pretense. It's being able to parrot formulas back and forth at each other. Like you go to school and they teach you chemistry, and then when you can parrot back the phrases that your chemistry teacher taught you, then you know chemistry. But you don't know anything. You're just good at regurgitating stuff you've been told. You're good at playing a game. It's like being good at Monopoly. Of course, the point is that we can know what this is, but not in terms of our normal human modes of knowing, our conceptual modes of knowing, our intellectual modes of knowing. But we are not actually humans. So just because humans are incompetent to know what this is, doesn't mean you can't, because you're not actually a human being. But of course, to affect that, to realize that, you have to discover that you're not a human being by discovering that you are this fundamental event that is doing itself here. You are that event. That event is happening completely irrationally, completely mysteriously, completely magically, entirely beyond the scope of any human conceptualization. But that needn't stymie you, because you're not human. You are this, and this can meet itself. It is continually meeting itself. I mean, you can't describe how you're experiencing your experience in the present moment. But you are, aren't you? It's a faculty you have. You're doing this. You're here. You're actually seeing all this. You're experiencing this present field of energies that is that we can call your experience. You have that functionality. That functionality is the exercise of an astounding intelligence. You effortlessly experience all the color that you're experiencing. No one taught you how to do that. You have the intelligence intrinsically, the spontaneous functionality to just bang. Here you are, here it is. It just meets itself and knows itself, recognizes itself. Again, you can't describe any of that or deconstruct any of that in any conceptual terms, in any human terms. But that's the nature of the beast. But the fact remains that you are this profound intrinsic intelligence, and so if you discover that you are, if you notice that you are, because you already are, it already is the case, then you will notice that this intelligence that you are is meeting itself as all of this phenomena constantly in real time, and with complete competence, with complete spontaneity, with complete inclusion, with no holds barred, with nothing being blocked, with a complete engagement. And this engagement is the actual knowing. This is we're actually going back to the earlier question of what is Rigpa, which is the fact of this instantaneous, hyper-intelligent assimilation of itself as all of this patterning, as all of this energy presence. And on the most profound level, this can actually be known. This can actually be directly participated in. I mean, it is this kind of a joke, because it always is being known. It always is being completely participated in. But it can be noticed that is the case, and hence it can be appreciated that is the case. And when we notice that, and when we appreciate that, we discover we are vastly more and other than we ever thought we were. We are not these little monkeys in these little bodies running around this vast external physical universe that's basically trying to squish us. We are an inconceivable, self-existent field of intelligence displaying itself to itself in endless modes, in endless dimensions of patterning, of content, of information. Basically, God looking at itself in a mirror. And again, this is not an abstraction. This is something that can be noticed very directly and very clearly.
Right, and what I find is that in that sense, what this is much simpler than our thoughts and words about it would suggest.
Yeah, sure. But simple not in a sense of having lesser event, simple in a sense of more integrated with itself.
More evident.
More unified, as it is its own event, intrinsic in itself. It's kind of blah, blah, blah. Kind of hard to verbalize. Kind of impossible to verbalize, in fact.
Thank you.
That's a nice ringtone.
Okay, question from the internet. As profound intelligence, why can't I translate the experience of this into human terms? Maybe a different language or something? Or maybe you are attempting to do this for us?
Well, you can within the limitations. I mean, all sacred texts and all spiritual teachings have been attempts to do just that, and they have not met with complete lack of success. However, they haven't met with complete success either in their own terms. Because ultimately, you're trying to convey something which can only be conveyed by it itself. Now, fortunately, language is not actually language. Language is actually transcendental energy presence. Language is actually transcendental intelligence. And it's this inherent, inconceivable intelligence that ultimately is where language comes from, and also what ultimately is experiencing language. So in actual fact, paradoxically, even though language in logical terms cannot convey reality, language can convey reality, because language is a Trojan horse for the divine intelligence, as everything is. I say these words like divine intelligence, and it's easy to go, oh yeah, what divine intelligence? But where does intelligence come from? Where does the force that is arranging the exact and precise disposition and interaction of all these quarks and atoms come from? what power is doing that? What power is making all of this functionality happen so astoundingly precisely in exactly the way it is? What force is making your heart beat and regulating your blood pressure? Well, in my case, it's blood pressure medication, but what force is putting thoughts in your head? What force is making the sun shine? What force is making gravity hold everything down with exactly the precise mode in proportion to the degree of its mass and distance from the center of the earth, etc., etc.? Where's that coming from? What's doing that? You know? It's inconceivable. It's absolutely inconceivable. It's just to take it as a given is easy. Well, it's just there. That's just the way things are. Well, cool, that's fine. But that doesn't really answer the question, does it? What's doing it? What is it? What is this astounding, inconceivable functionality and synchronicity that where everything works together like this astounding clockwork? You know, and to me, it's not too much of a leap, it's not going too far out into left field to call that an intelligence. And since it's essentially miraculous, it comes from nowhere, it just, bang, it just is. Calling it divine is kind of nice. I mean, God is sort of on this wonderful, silly notion that, you know, it's easy to, it's sort of the ultimate fuzzy. You know, you can't say what it is, so you can sort of hang anything on it. But it's a wonderful notion for that very regard, because in its very ambiguity, in its very extreme, absolute nature, the fact that there's no way you can get a handle on what God is, what God means. So that notion rather nicely illustrates this principle of absolute mystery that all of this ultimately boils down to. All of this right here, and again, I'm not trying to talk in abstractions, I'm talking about this actual fact, this that is right here, this that is actual, that is real, that is present. You know, what's doing it? Where's it coming from? So, when I say divine intelligence, I'm not trying to be metaphorical or poetic or religious or arrogant. I'm trying to indicate very precisely that there is something astounding that's actually here, that's actually functional, that's absolutely inconceivable, and yet is the farthest thing from an abstraction that there is. It's the most actual thing. It's this actuality of functionality that your experience is evidence of and is ultimately consists of and is made of and is doing it. So I'm trying to illustrate and indicate something that is profoundly concrete, not in the least abstract or metaphorical or poetic.
Hello, Peter.
Hi.
I've been sort of trying to... No, I've been so busy this week, but I didn't want to sort of stop noticing. And so in the most prosaic and mundane ways, there would be like these startling moments where one interesting one. It sort of reminds me when you were talking about the dark and how light comes. I was rummaging around in a closet looking for some wrapping paper, and I couldn't get the light on. And then I picked up this box, and in it were these family photographs that I thought they had been lost, for maybe about a year, probably since last Christmas. And I was just so overwhelmed with relief, but I was wordless. And all of a sudden, I just, this just showed itself. And it was because I was so startled. And there's been a couple of other moments. So I'm even thinking of writing a Peter Brown for housewives. Because almost everything you've said, is just affirmed. And when you were talking about words, yes, properly, or ideas properly, said and properly listened are sort of affirmations of this. I don't even know if I would have picked up on what happened last night, except just about a week ago we've been talking about being startled.
Noticing, which basically means having a clear experience of how astounding this event that's occurring always right here, right now, actually is, can happen any time, and it doesn't need to be special. You don't need to be in church, or you don't need to be looking at a sunset, or you don't need to be listening to a hymn or praying or meditating. You can be sitting on the toilet. You can be, having someone flip you off in traffic. Whatever. It's just because this is always what it is, and at any moment you can notice what it is. You can appreciate it. You can go, just appreciate and notice directly how wrong we are all our lives when we try and turn this into normalcy or boring or simple or dull or mundane or prosaic. Those qualities don't exist unless we create them. What exists in actuality, and nothing but, is an astounding, miraculous inconceivability. And it is so self-evident that that's the case when you notice it, when you learn how to see it, when you begin to notice just that this experiencing that is unstoppably and spontaneously occurring in the middle of infinity it's inconceivable. It's just a mind blower.
Yeah, definitely that. Constantly showing and it's always sort of completely new, but behind it, it's totally familiar.
Yeah.
And that's a real paradox, but that's the truth.
Yeah. It always is unique. It never repeats itself, but it never departs from itself. It never becomes anything other than exactly this. It's always exactly reality. It never departs from that in the slightest. But at the same time, it continually reveals ever new aspects of itself with zero repetition and with an infinite degree of differentiation, of complex display, right? It's just experience. It's what our experience has always been, right?
Yeah.
But it's, just to really notice how amazing that is this astounding fact, this concrete fact. It's the concrete presence of absolute inconceivability, of absolute transcendence, of absolute bottomlessness. And all the metaphysics of all religious traditions turn out to be elaborations of and celebrations of this one fact. The inseparability of Shiva and Shakti, is this, right here, right now. You know, Christ born, the only child of God born in the darkness to illuminate the world, is this right here, right now. All these myths, all these grandiose stories that people have, been killing each other over by the millions, is nothing other than depictions of and celebrations of and metaphors of this single event that is unstoppably and continually occurring right here, right now. I.e., your being. Right? You are this, you are here, you are now. That's completely self-evident, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're here, you're now. This is not a notion, this is not some subtlety, it's stupidly obvious. You are here now. You are this here now. It's never not true. What's it look like? Well, anything. It looks different every instant. But it always is exactly that. It never is more than that, it's never less than that. But what that is self-evidently, astoundingly infinite, ungraspable, undefinable, uncircumscribable. You can't delineate it. You can't come up with a bunch of parameters that inclusively include it. It's infinitely open-ended. It's a literal infinity in the sense of, infinite etymologically means without ending. You can't find an ending. You can't find a boundary. You can't find a delineation. You can't find a place where it stops. And again, not as abstractions. I'm talking about just this, your experience right here, right now. Can you find an edge? Can you find an ending? Can you find a bottom? Can you find where it is? Can you find anything whatsoever other than the fact of it itself? Kind of a somber tone to the talk tonight. Need a little more levity. I apologize, it's probably my fault.
Well, it is funny in a way, if you think about it.
Always is a thigh slapper for me, for sure. When I'm not drooling over in a corner of the room and shivering.
I got an email from a friend who's an astrologer, and she said at 9:30 tonight is the exact moment of the solstice, and that everything kind of stops at that moment. We're just and then it starts going the other way. That's the moment of the solstice happening. I'm not saying that's a moment of levity exactly, but it's kind of interesting. I've never known exactly when that was supposed to be, and this is the first time I've heard that it is. What do you think about all stuff like that?
Matter of measurement. Mm-hmm. You measure the orbits of the planets and the Earth and the Sun and do the math, and you can kind of narrow it down pretty precisely exactly where it is in its orbit and at what point it's, doing what it's doing.
Yeah, I guess I was wondering whether we would, since we know that time, then whether we would actually feel anything happening.
Well, you'll feel something happening. You'll feel this happening.
Yeah.
The moment of the solstice means that the north axis of the Earth's pole of rotation is pointing as far as it can away from the sun, and the southern pole is pointing most towards it. Then as it comes around like this, it comes to a point like here, which is the equinox, when it's the north pole and the south pole of the axis are equidistant from the sun, and then it comes around to the summer solstice, and then the northern axis is pointing most exactly towards the sun. So it's just the geometry of the apparent orbit of the Earth around the sun. But, you can feel qualities. I mean, if anyone has looked into astrology, you may well notice, as I have, that there's something going on there that is meaningful. And there's qualities present at every instant. There's aspects present at every instant. All of the astronomical bodies as indicators are continually in motion and continually juxtaposed against each other in terms of various subtle angles and so on and so forth. And all of that, looking at that as an energy system, it's always ongoing, and it's an aspect of your experience. So. But we're always experiencing qualities every instant, right? There's this constant symphony of moods and flavors. I mean, every instant just has a unique flavor, right? Just a feeling tone. And it's always shifting. It's always sort of dancing and drifting in and out. And sometimes it's focused and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's intense and sometimes it's dull, sort of lethargic. And even to characterize it grossly like that is absurd, because most of the qualities that are present are very, very fine, nuanced vibes, moods, what.
They don't seem to get very, very less mysterious, so they seem to maybe even get more mysterious all the time.
Sure. But, mysterious is a matter of context. If like we were talking about earlier, if you're saying you can't make rational sense of them in human logical terms, if that's your criteria of mystery, then you can find it wherever you look. But if you're using mystery to refer to the ultimate, ultimately transcendental, ultimately infinite nature of what any and all phenomena consist of, then of course you can find that anywhere you look. And again, that sounds like a lot of abstractions, but I'm referring to a very, very, very concrete, supremely concrete fact of your present experience right here, right now.
It still doesn't seem to get more clear, though, as time passes or anything like that.
Define clear.
More comprehensible.
Yeah, but again, if you're defining comprehensibility in terms of describability in human terms or in rational logical terms, I would say you're pretty much screwed, right? Because when has that ever happened?
From time to time, but doesn't seem to have gotten. It hasn't seemed to have increased any through the years, or not very much anyway, maybe a little bit from time to time.
Nothing has ever been clearly described in human terms. The greatest Nobel Prize-winning scientists that have ever lived have never clearly said exactly what anything is. They can talk a lot about it in terms of various parameters of experimentation and so on, but they don't know what any of it is. So if that's what you want for clarity, you're kind of shit out of luck.
Is there any changelessness in this, maybe absolute clarity?
Yes, ultimately this is an absolute clarity in the sense that it is clearly what it is. It is clearly itself. And that is a changelessness in that it never departs from itself. But in terms of phenomena, in terms of how it presents itself, of course, there's nothing but change, there's nothing but variation, there's nothing but difference. And yet those two aspects of it are one and the same, irrationally and irreconcilably. It's like we can say, when we wake up from a dream, that nothing happened in the dream. There was nothing there. A dream is a non-event. It's not like anything happened in the dream because there's nothing there to happen. And yet, there's all the apparent event of the dream, and that's very analogous to what's going on here. There's all of this astounding display of information and diversity, and yet it never departs from itself. It's always just this experiencing. And those two seemingly paradoxical opposites are one and the same thing, one and the same phenomena. This is that. This is an absolute consistency with itself that always looks absolutely different. It's just empirical. It's just, this is pretty self-evident. Have you ever experienced anything else? Your experience has always been exactly your experience. It's exactly the same. It never departs from that. And yet, is it ever looked the same? Have you ever experienced the same thing twice? Have any two moments of your experience looked exactly the same? All right, now we'll have some fun. I can tell.
I feel silly asking this question.
Oh, good. Some silliness.
Okay, so I've talked about this with you before, about how some of my most profound openings to reality have happened in completely unexpected circumstances. Like one time when I was staring at a dumpster outside of Starbucks.
Mm-hmm. Happens to a lot of us. It's called the dumpster effect.
So I definitely, and at the same time, it's easy. It becomes very apparent what this is when we're sitting in this format, listening to you talk about it. But what happens to me is that I go home after this, and then a whole week or 2 weeks or whatever will go by, and I'll be caught up in, focusing on my career and how can I earn more money, and, what do I do with my laundry, and, just the day-to-day stuff. Mm-hmm. And I have this longing for the frequency of those experiences of noticing to increase. Mm-hmm. But I, at the same time, feel a very obstinate refusal to engage in regular spiritual practice. Like, I hate meditation. I just refuse.
I'm with you.
So I'm looking for that magic pill. Like, is there a spiritual multivitamin that I can take one a day to increase the frequency of noticing?
Not legally. But hey, this is California. Who cares about legalities? Well, but it's interesting to look at the mechanism of why that happens. Why do we get sucked into the details of our lives? We can have these amazing noticings. We can have these amazing sort of revelatory experiences where it's just so obvious that what's going on here is astounding, is just intrinsically transcendental. And yet, as you say, most typically we may, 2 weeks later, we may be in the thick of our lives and neurotic and pissed off and ambitious and what all. And where did that go? Where's this amazing, transcendental revelation? Where did it go? And if we understand the mechanism of that, it can help with the whole thing a bit. The mechanism is interpretation. This is, well, let's put it this way. this is fundamentally a mystery, but we're experts at pretending it's not. We're experts at pretending that our sloppy, unverified interpretations of what this is, of what we are, of what our life consists of, are true. And we learned to do this as kids. We learned, when you were a month old, you didn't know what anything was. And, your parents in society, everyone says, oh, this is a car, this is, you're a girl, this is a house, this is the world, look, there's the sun. And we become experts at playing that game, and ultimately we forget it's a game. We think that things are merely the sort of way that we hold them to be as these very stick-figure definitions in our mind. And we've forgotten how shoddy our own and how partial and how unbelievable our own interpretations are. We hold them sort of, it's like in a hypnotic trance where we hold these interpretations as if they were true, even though we knew when we were kids that they weren't true. I mean, someone would say, oh, that's the sun, and you'd go, whoa, So what does that mean? So it's the sun. And then you'd go to a science class in 6th grade, and they'd talk about astronomy and stars and planets and nuclear fusion and stuff, and you'd go, yeah, okay, great, there's all those words, but what does that mean? What is it really? I mean, all this describability doesn't really describe anything. It's just all of this pretense of being able to say a lot about things that we don't really know anything about. And we basically have successfully hypnotized ourselves to not notice that we don't actually know, which enables us to believe our definitions of who we are and what I'm going for in life and what I'm up against and all of these elements that create a normal life, ultimately a boring and unsatisfying life, a life of just, being on the human treadmill that's going nowhere but to the grave. And we've bootstrapped it into existence. It's based on nothing. It's all fantasy. But of course we've forgotten that it's a fantasy, and that's a problem. Now these moments of noticing or moments of revelation are seeing through the fantasy. Whether or not we're aware that that's what we're doing, we're seeing, wow, wait a minute, there's something here, and it's completely beyond what I've been holding it to be. It's completely beyond this story that I usually sort of feel myself inhabiting of my definitions and my descriptions of my life and myself and what's going on. So, in terms of technique, what I recommend, in terms of spiritual practice, the P word, the dreaded P word, what I recommend is exactly that, is noticing. I call it noticing, which is dignifying it way too much, but it just simply means to capitalize on those moments where you are in a relatively undefined frame of mind, and you're just, to some degree, the wonder of life is hitting you. Maybe like profoundly, like you're drooling and shitting your pants and just losing it, or maybe just a little like, oh, wow, that's kind of nice, and then going on your way. So,
when you say capitalize on them, what do you mean?
Well, what I mean is,
because my experience is the more I try and cling to them and make them bigger and better,
cling and big and better is not capitalizing. That's just the opposite. Of course, as you discover, if you try and hold these things, that's the sure way to keep them away. You have to be loose with it. You learn how to be with them by being with them. You have to be loose, you have to be playful, you have to be paradoxical, you have to be very generous. It's like if you love something, let it go. That's the way to be with these revelations, with these opennesses, is be very gentle, be grateful, but be gentle. And when they go, let them go, and you go back into your normal life, fully confident that they'll come again. It might be 5 minutes or a day or a week or a month or a year, but sooner or later you'll find yourself again in this, wow, and it won't have gone anywhere. You won't have lost anything. And every time you have that experience, it's cumulative. Every time you have that experience, it's chipping away from the bottom up, from the inside out, at your credulousness, at your credulity in this imaginary world you feel stuck in. And because these experiences are such clear evidence that it's not the case. And they are cumulative, and they will win because that's real, that's true, and the other stuff is just imaginary. And reality always trumps imagination in the long run. It may take a while, and ultimately this is a matter of karma or luck, you might say. You know, you might have these experiences once in a blue moon, or you might have them more often. And you can't really, as you'll discover, you can't really contrive it, you can't really fake it. But it can happen that you find yourself having them more often. And if so, that means you're lucky, you have the karma, you are in this process of unfoldment spontaneously. But that's the only way you can be in it genuinely, because trying to do it, trying to contrive it, trying to use a practice to make these things happen turns out to be gamesmanship and pretense. You know, there are lots and lots of people who spend a great deal of their time doing spiritual practices, not having these experiences. Well, I'm not. Present company excluded, of course. But because, you know, it has to be real. It has to be the genuine article, and you can't fake that. You can't contrive it. You know, you have to really find it. But you can't find it because it's always here. It is findable. So the trick is to be lucky. The trick is to win the lottery. Okay, but maybe you have. Maybe you are lucky, and if so, trust the luck. Take advantage of it, and above all. You can encourage it, you can sort of coax it along by being gentle with it, be playful with it, be open with it, be generous with it, be loose with it. Don't be clinging, don't be graspy, don't be heavy-handed, don't be mechanical or too methodical. You know, it's a will-o'-the-wisp, it's like a muse, it's like a fairy. You know, you woo it, you flirt with it, you play with it, you tease it, and it teases you, and it comes and goes. And that's the way of it. That's the way of it. You can't, if you try to be too structured with it, you will kill it. It doesn't work like that. It's not amenable to heavy-handedness because, above all else, it's a profound intelligence, and it's not stupid. If you try to use stupid means to be with it, it will laugh at you. It will just leave you in the lurch. But when you meet it with intelligence, it respects that. And intelligence is subtlety. Intelligence is nuance. Intelligence is tricky and works on many levels. And it can be witty and can use puns and can be, you know, non-linear and inconsistent, right?
It's charming.
Yes, charming. Hopefully.
So then I have a follow-up question. So once you reach that state of, I guess, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, enlightenment or wakefulness or awareness, full awareness, does that, you know, you've talked about that before, you've explained to me that it never stops unfolding, there's no finality to it. It's so hard to picture that.
Well, you have to, you know, it's easy to have a fantastic idea of what we're talking about. You know, the actuality of this is not some ongoing condition of anything in particular. What it is, you know, the only thing that actually could be accurately described as realization or enlightenment is the discovery that this never departs from itself, no matter what state it presents as. In other words, when it feels to you like this is clarity or this revelation is something that you can get or lose, then you're not in that condition. But when you get it, that even when you get it or lose it, you're not getting or losing anything. It's dance. It's never-ending nuance. It's ongoing revelation of itself. It reveals itself as incoherence. It reveals itself as pain. It reveals itself as conflict and chaos. It reveals itself as all qualities. And none of these qualities are better or worse than any of the other qualities, and they are all direct revelations of this actuality. And as long as we're playing a partial game where we're playing one condition off against another, I want peace, but I don't want, agitation. I want pleasure, but I don't want pain. I want clarity, but I don't want confusion. As long as you're doing that, you're not being with this as it is, and that very fact sort of shuts you off from it to a degree. And the point of this sort of continually going to it, continually sort of finding yourself in this noticing and having that be a cumulative event, is it shows you what it is, and it shows you its inclusiveness, its multidimensionality, that it can present as anything, as any qualities whatsoever, and yet is not any less or greater for the way it's presenting, for what quality is being presented. So, in other words, realization is not a stasis. It's not some kind of homeostasis or some kind of, plain vanilla, zero condition, so much as it is the absolute certainty of always being this. It is always this, whatever it looks like. It is always this, whatever it looks like. And it's easy to sort of intuit that or extrapolate that might be the case, but to know that, incontrovertibly, unarguably, as a self-evident, self-verifying fact, is what realization consists of. And still, the dance continues forever. It comes and goes. It's intrinsically flirtatious. It's intrinsically, dynamic. It's intrinsically, it's like the ocean. It's just it never stops moving. It's all these currents and these modes and huge storms and gorgeous, clear peacefulnesses and just everything. All of its modes are just its modes. Its way of being itself.
I once read that the Bible started out with the words, "O cosmic breather," and then it got changed.
O cosmic breather?
Breather. O cosmic breather, as in breath.
I could work a joke in there somewhere. Thanks for lobbing that one across the plate.
But anyway, I went to the aquarium, the aquarium of the bay yesterday, which is this aquarium, but all the fish that are in the bay are in the aquarium. There was, cod and sturgeon, and striped bass and perch and cod. But anyway, I was impressed with this school of anchovies were swimming along. They were just swimming along like this, and all of a sudden they went like this, and then they went like that, and then they turned around, and I thought, who is guiding this thing?
Yeah. Or you've ever seen birds? Sometimes you can, this season particularly, a lot of times it's just kind of not particularly spectacular, but sometimes you'll have these tight formations of hundreds of birds, and they're going like,
yeah.
And it's so synchronistic, and it's startling, right?
Right. Yeah, it was like one organism, and are the leaders doing?
Yeah, that one's doing it, right?
Yeah.
That one. No, not that one. The one next to him.
No. Yeah, it was really interesting.
Yeah. But that's it, that exact principle, like the way a school of fish swims, especially when they're doing these obviously spectacular interactions, or birds or something. And then look at the way anything works, the way everything works. All situations that have all of these complex variable components that all sort of like, do this sort of dance and move in and out of each other. And we're used to thinking, oh, it's just, chance and functionality, and, you walk in the room and you do what you do and you leave the room and you're just in your own thoughts and stuff. But everything happens together. Everything happens synchronistically. Everything happens as this real-time event that is supremely integrated with itself in a lot of very nonlinear ways. And we have sort of rationales of that we don't really understand, but because we have rationales, we think we do. Like the way your body works. Right now there's like how many millions or billions of cells in your body, and they're all more or less cooperating in this astounding symphony and dance and interaction. What's up with that? How do they know? Which cell is telling which cell what to do? There's just this amazing synchronicity of a system that's basically non-localized. It's not like there's a hierarchy and there's one cell somewhere that's like running the show. It's a pattern, and the entire pattern works together. And where's it coming from? Who's pulling the strings? What's the organizing principle? And this is very much what we've been talking about all night, is what's doing this? What's doing this? Right now, right here, right now. Not as an abstraction, but this actuality, what's doing it? It works with itself so astoundingly well, right? I mean, your experience is, no part of your experience gets in the way of any other part of your experience, Every pixel of your vision is distinct from every other pixel, and they don't fight, they don't conflict, they're just sitting in this a perfect, astounding array dynamically. How? Thought happens, it doesn't get in the way of sound. Sound happens, it doesn't get in the way of sensation. Every portion of your experience is happening completely unobstructedly and not blocking any other portion of your experience. What's doing it? How's that work? This inconceivably complex system, and again, not as an abstraction. This actuality that you're looking at right now, you're looking at nothing but that. How does it work with itself so well? It's a mystery. It's a miracle. It's astounding. And ultimately, it's clearly the revelation of something that's just mind-boggling. There's something that's just, And it's an actuality. It's right here. This is its display. We're not talking about something that's, a fairy tale or a myth or a story or a metaphor. It couldn't possibly be any more concrete. Would you mind speaking to the mic? There's throngs of people online, believe it or not, who are hanging on your every word.
I just made me think of my dad a little bit, because as he ages and is working less and less, he really likes to sit and stare at the wall.
I can relate.
Or I'll catch him. Sometimes on family vacations, I'll just catch him off in the yard somewhere, just sitting, and I think he's kind of getting at that, because my mother has expressed that he's sort of saddened by his life coming to an end, as he's in his mid-70s or so, I feel that with him, that he's just sort of like, he's trying to get at that essence. When he's sitting there, he's not doing anything. It's a kind of sort of, he doesn't have his eyes closed. He's not meditating like that. He's just sort of being and experiencing that.
And this is experienceable, you can be with this, in any degree, even just in a little way of just like, wow, something really interesting going on here. And you don't need to wait till your 70s. I mean, you may find yourself doing it then, but, beat the rush. You can, for those of us who are not in our 70s yet, beat the rush, why not? Because this is already what it is, and it's not going to become something else. So it's available. We can be with this. We can relax into it freshly. Be with it in the the ever-present newness of the moment. We have 2 minutes left in the formal portion of the evening's entertainment. So if anyone wants to hear a topic talked about and that hasn't been talked about yet, now would be the time. We have a taker. Oh, hi. Didn't see
Peter.
you.
I'm standing back here. I was sitting back there just kind of enjoying the whole thing. But, I wanted to share this with you. I had a lucid dream about, it was actually the night of it was the morning of the lunar eclipse. Mm-hmm. And I think my sleep pattern was disrupted, and I was up for an hour and then went back to sleep. And it was like I went to sleep and I woke up. It was the way it was. And the thing I wanted to ask about was, and I realized this as you were talking just a bit ago, the dream felt just as solid as this. And it was, as soon as I woke up into the dream, what I found myself doing was examining the dream. And it was unbelievable. I mean, it was just unbelievable. There was a box and there was writing on it. And I was like, I couldn't have created that box, but yet it was just like a box sitting on a table somewhere. And so I started just exploring everything like that, And when I woke up, I thought of the thing that one time Ramana Maharshi was asked, what's the difference between a dream and waking? And he said, well, really not much. One's long and one's short. And it was exactly like that. And so I don't know if you can comment on that or not, but I just wanted to share it with
sure. I mean, this is, for those of us that have very lucid dreams, or have had that experience, this is the immediately discovered fact that the dream feels fucking real. It feels just as real as this, just as detailed. You can be in this intensely actual situation with really intricately detailed things going on around you and specific objects and, you know, people you're interacting with in very complex ways, and they're displaying their personality quirks and you have yours, and, you know, and if you see this, if you have a clearly lucid dream, it's quite clear that you cannot prove you aren't dreaming now. And when you're in the middle of a lucid dream, you can't prove that you are dreaming. You know, unless you can fly or something. But hey, weird shit happens in this side of things too. You know, we typically think of dreams as these vague, nebulous things because we typically remember them from the waking perspective, where we generally don't remember them very well. So of course we're having a fantasy about the dream, not the dream itself. So the fantasy may be cloudy. It's like trying to remember what you had for lunch yesterday. You can picture it, but it's not as real as when you were actually eating it, right? And the dream is of course, is the same way. If you're remembering it from another time, of course it's going to seem vague. But the precision of and the actuality of present experience is completely obvious. Anyway, it's about quitting time. So thank you all very much for coming. If you're inclined to stick around for a little while, we're going to have a little loose gathering and solstice/holiday party or whatever happens. Maybe it'll be a non-event, but anyway, we can hang out and chat and have some snacks and whatever. Thank you all so much for coming.